Hello and welcome to Game Brain, a board game podcast about our gaming group. I'm Ben Mandelker. Joining me today on the old pod, Trey Alsup. What's going on, Trey?
Hi, Ben. Good morning.
Good morning.
We are recovering from a late night game night this morning.
Late night. Yeah, I mean,
that's true. You cut out earlier. I was there till
you stayed
after 2.
Oh, you waited for them to finish their game?
I had to, yeah, because Dimitri and I carpooled.
That is
so I'm hungover on board games.
Wow. I'm always hungover on board games. I feel like I'm hungover. I feel like I'm hungover on life these days. I feel like there's so much that's going on. Yeah, we gamed a lot this week, Trey. It was a big Ben and Trey week.
I needed it.
Me
I'd
too.
been going through a board game desert with everyone's travel, and so I was ready to hit it.
I needed it too, even though it did actually kind of throw my week out of whack. Like I did not really go to the gym this week, didn't eat healthy. You know, it is like...
Well, you'll do a lot of hitting the gym and eating healthy while you're traveling Europe.
Yeah, Europe is known for just like healthy eating, low-cal foods, and just fitness.
I bet you lose weight though. I think that's one of those things. I was like, when you travel, you eat ravenously and you still lose weight
because you're walking everywhere.
Yes.
So basically, I'm going to Europe this week. Because I'm doing some shows for Watch What Crappens out there and then turning it into a vacation. So I'll be gone for 3 weeks. So Game Brain listeners, you know, like I apologize.
You've been getting a lot of Ben, but stock up because the Ben drought is coming.
Yeah, exactly. I've done a big run of episodes here, but it's really just like I'm
Thank you for doing that.
Stockpiling.
I've learned that when the text messages says, "Hey, are you guys recording this weekend?" that means you're going to.
Well, when I text it out, it's kind of like no one's saying anything. So
yeah.
Because the thing is this, like I am, for those who don't know, since I don't talk about it enough, I do have another podcast. I'm in my main job.
You're
is
a professional podcaster.
Yes. So for me, just saying, oh, we have to do an episode. Okay, let me turn on a mic and talk about something. That's just my life. That's just like what I do. That's my. That's
like breathing.
It's my love language. It's turning on a mic and talking. But I know it's not the same for everyone. So that's why I know when everyone's busy, I'm like, okay, I'll just do it. Make something happen, you know? Making myself sound very heroic, and I'm not. I'm just someone who press record. I'm just a girl standing in front of a boy.
Standing in front of a microphone.
Asking the microphone to love him. But we saw each other a lot this week. We had a lot of gaming sessions, which was really fun. And I'm really excited for
thanks for hosting.
No problem. And I think did I mention on the podcast last week that when I'm going to Europe, I am going to be in Germany at one point, and I'm going to go to a game store in Cologne that I'm blanking on again, but apparently it's like one of the best game stores in Germany.
Okay.
And I'm really excited because, you know, Germany is board game central. And so to be able to go to a top game store in Germany is going to be like a real thrill. And I'm wondering, like, am I going to find something there? Am I going to bring it back? Will I have the room for it in my luggage? So these are all concerns that I have at the moment.
I had when I'm walking around, I recently went on a cruise with my parents.
You just got back
to Europe. And I actually found, like, as you're walking around, like, I did spot a game store in Florence.
Wow. And
it was an excellent game store. And I remember walking in, and they had like great space for games in what is, you know, an ancient building kind of thing. And I have regrets because they had Star Wars Unlimited product there in Italian.
Wow.
And I should have just bought it.
Yeah, that probably would have been worth something, right?
I think so. I'm told that like the different language makes it worth not as much money when you resell it, but it's playable. And like Star Wars Unlimited right now is completely sold out. There's no product anywhere. Their first run is completely sold out, and so I should have bought a bunch of Italian.
And especially because you could have been like, "It's me, Darth Vader. Luke, I am your father."
I like you brought Luigi into this.
Technically, it was Mario, but it's fine.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, Mario and Luigi. You're right. I think it would have been harder for me to it was hard enough just to get Jenny to pause for me to go into a game store. It's like, we're in Europe, we're in Florence, and you want to go into a game store, and I said yes. Yes, I do. But it's a similar thing. Like when you're walking around, perhaps you'll come across something, but you're actually planning to go.
I'm planning to go. And in fact, when I'm going to be in Cologne, I'm going to be with a friend. And she was the one who said, Ben, I'm going to take you to a game store. Like she has planned this out for me. But it's funny because I think I mentioned a week or two ago on the podcast about how when I was in New York City, I went to the Complete Strategist board game shop. That's where I got the Salton Sea, which we are going to actually review today. Deep dive review, impressions, whatever you want to call it. But I dragged my boyfriend to that. And I don't remember if I said on the podcast, but there was a little chair and he just sat patiently while I walked through and browsed. But, sometimes, the significant others.
So Dom just like waited at the front, did not.
He literally waited at the front. There was a little chair right by the door and he sat there on his phone and he was like, no, go do your thing.
No
I'm on my phone. I'm
in seeing the freak show in the Complete Strategist. Okay.
I've dragged him to these places before. Okay. He gets it. He supports, but it's hard. The significant others of board game enthusiasts,
right.
They don't always see the joy that we see the joy. And like, I know that pressure where you're like, oh, like I would have spent another hour in there, but I was like, I don't want him to be sitting there the entire time.
Yeah.
But maybe it's good. Maybe it's good to have like some urgency.
No. Yeah.
Whereas like you do, cause like
you can't just wander for an hour cause you will.
I will. I'll walk and I'll do laps. Cause I'm like, maybe.
And Complete Strategist is like the games are floor to ceiling and the ceilings are like 18-foot ceilings too. Yeah. Like, so it's not Harry Potter-esque, but it's different than the way California board game shops feel.
Yeah, and I went in there, and the first game I actually pulled off the shelf is a game called Hollywood 1947, which is from that same lineage as Tortuga, which we talked about and experimented with.
You talked about this on the pod.
Did I talk about that?
I think you did. Okay. You mentioned it, I think.
Yeah, but
not to shut down the conversation, but I'm just saying.
I'm still intrigued.
It's a game on your brain.
It's a game on my brain. I mean, these little social deduction games. My experience with Tortuga was that it's flawed, but I felt like there was more upside than there was downside. I think that like that's a game that I wouldn't feel bad about house ruling things because in the back of the book it kind of is. That's the spirit of it. They're like, you can do this to it, this to it, this to it.
We know this game doesn't quite work, so if you want to fix it, let us know.
Yeah, take out half the cards. They already, I mean, we mentioned this before, that they're coming out with a new version of it with tweaked rules, shortened, all the issues that we've had with it, they are addressing, which I think is actually really cool. So Hollywood 1947, social deduction. I looked at the videos and I don't really understand like how it's going to work. It just looks strange to me, but I feel like I've heard enough people say good things about it that including the owner of Bitewing Games, which put out recently Zuvadis and a bunch of these like Reiner Knizia reprints.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
He put up a video that was like, this is the only social deduction game I like, which who knows what that means? Right. Is that a good thing or is it a bad thing?
Right. I don't know.
It was enough that I got the game.
Okay.
But then I was going to buy Come Together, which is about like
music festival, right?
Music festival. It's kind of like putting on like Woodstock. And I was going to get that because I've been eyeing that for over a year. But then I saw Salton Sea and I was like, you know what? Let me take some two little games. And
right. Salton Sea looks little.
It looks
but is not
little in terms of physical space for my carry-on luggage.
Yeah, kudos for it fits. Yeah, it's a very dense box, small box.
And speaking of which, by the way, so another small box game that we both enjoy quite a bit, most people enjoy quite a bit, is the White Castle.
Yeah, I love it.
And there's an expansion coming out for it called White Castle Matcha. So it's adding matcha as a resource. I don't know really anything beyond that. But
and matcha is tea?
Yeah, it's like green tea. Uh-huh. So I don't know any details beyond the fact that it is coming, but for people who are fans of the White Castle, there is an expansion that's in the works.
It seems like it would be a very easy to expand game because it's so tight and efficient. Not tight, but it's efficient. It's an efficient game.
Yeah.
Like you only played 9 actions on the whole game or something like that.
But they're all combo-y.
Yeah, and very combo-y. So you could expand it, but like I like how short and kind of compact.
I was about to say,
it is. When we say tight, a lot of times, like we're going to probably use the word tight to describe Salton Sea.
The word might come up a bit
economically
today.
Tight, where you wish you had more money to do more things.
I mean, the White Castle to me actually doesn't feel, and this is not a bad. When I say this is not in a bad way. It does not feel like a tight game to me. In that, usually when there's something you want to do, there's some fascinating sort of like work around you can get to. I'm like, oh, I can send someone to here, which gets me a bonus that I can cycle into this, and that gives me this, and I can do this and this and this and this, and now I finally get to move my meeple up in the castle. Like there's like I feel like that's the fun of the game. Where I feel like the game is tight is that like it does all the stuff with a small amount of options in terms of like they're not a huge amount of actions to take, they're not a huge amount of resources, but the things that you can do with those things, there's like a whole world of possibilities. Like
Right.
it's tight in design.
Yeah, you don't have this, unlike Salton Sea where you have like 12 different things you can do. I feel like it's a little more streamlined in terms of what your options are in White Castle. I want to talk about game stores while we're still talking about great game stores. I'm evangelical.
Oh
about,
yeah, I know what you're going to talk about.
Okay, well, good. Like, so in Los Angeles, if you're a Southern California person, Geeky Teas and Games, which has been in Burbank and is still in Burbank, but they've moved to a new location on Alameda, and I just want people to kind of check out this place because they're in a new space. I think it like is space that used to be owned by Nickelodeon Studios. So like some of the walls actually have like
is that where it is? That Nickelodeon space?
Yeah, not the crazy one that you see when you're driving by, but rather it was one of their other offices. Okay. But like when you go into the space, there's actually drawings on the wall that have survived from the Nickelodeon offices.
Wow.
I think. In any case, it's a very large space, which is rare in Los Angeles because real estate is very expensive.
Yeah.
But the thing that's so exciting about this is that they have tons and tons of game rooms. Like not just your kind of typical big, hey, we're going to play Magic the Gathering here on Saturday spaces. They have that space, but they also have big space like dedicated just for miniature gamers. And then they have around like 12 to 15 individual gaming rooms.
Yeah.
That you can rent for half a day, or the early part or the late part, but they're also like themed. Like each one of these is they're tricking them out so that they're themed. So you feel like you're going into a, cottagecore room, or you're going into a cyberpunk room, or you're going into kind of like a wizard's, laboratory room. And so this is perfect for, hey, we need a space to run RPG. And like as I was going through this, like this place just opened this week, and already there were like 5 groups of clearly were after school kids running RPGs in the time after school. And I was like, this is great. Yeah. People should check it out in terms of the space there. They even have a performance space. We might be able to record podcasts there. So I'm just kind of encouraging people to really check it out. And also, I went there to see if they had Salton Sea. They did not, but they did the thing which good game stores do, which says, well, we could order that for you. Right. And I knew you were leaving town, so I liked the game enough to get my own copy. And I figured, okay, they'll order it and I'm going to hear about this in a month or something like that. And instead, 2 days later, I got the text and they had the game in.
Yeah, I was about to say because
I was really surprised. Like they got it in right away.
That's great.
And I got a text.
And like the truth is that you could have ordered it yourself. But it's sort of nice. It's nice to support these places. And I was talking to you before. I'm like, I don't know what I'm really looking for out of game stores these days because since I'm so kind of voracious, like when I see a game, I usually just order it online. And then by the time every time I go to a city, I'm like, ooh, I can't wait to see the game store. And I go in, I'm like, they've got so many games, but I have already bought all the games that I want. So I'm like, what do I really want out of these game stores? And I think that part of it is that you find a surprise. You find the games that you're like borderline with. So for me, that was Salton Sea, that was Hollywood 1947. But like, I think sometimes it's just fun to walk in game stores and you just see the games. You just literally see them and touch them and hold them. It's like, I never understood, for instance, why people would go to car shows and take photos next to a car. That was Trey's phone. Sorry about that. Everyone who just checked their phone, that was Trey.
It was me. Sorry.
But
Silencing. I am not a professional podcaster.
That was Geeky Teas. Listen, I've been podcasting for 12 years and my phone still goes off. Yep. You don't even know the chaos that happens. But I'm like, I never understood why people take photos next to cars at car shows. I always thought that's the strangest. It's like, it's not your car. Why are you taking a photo next to it like it's your car? But like, I kind of get it now that I'm actually in a hobby. Because I'm like, oh, it's just that you love it so much,
right?
You want to be around it and makes you happy.
That's what I was taking pictures of all of these themed game rooms.
Yeah,
and I think like to answer your question, like we have seen, like there have been board game cafes in LA and they've struggled, but I think that is the place where game stores can go. Is like they are a hub. For a community. And I know like I look at the event schedule there and I see like Star Wars Unlimited Wednesday night. So like that becomes a hub for communities. And also like maybe for somebody like me, I don't have space in my apartment to have 8 people over to game. So like I haven't done it yet, but like the option of like, well, we could rent a room at Geeky Teas, or we could just go to their open gaming space and sit down. And I think that's like $5, for play as long as you want. And access their library.
Yeah.
So that's a place I can go.
It's a way to get like a group. Also meetups. So like if you're someone who doesn't have a game group or people aren't around but you want to play a game, like maybe you go do that. I think also, you know what I would really like from a game store, because this happens to me all the time, is that I walk in and maybe there's something I've heard of but I haven't done any research on, or there's a game that looks sort of intriguing, and I ask the people there, what have you heard about this game? And they don't know anything.
Right.
And it happens all the time. And this is not to shade people who work at these stores. I understand like not everyone can know everything about every game. I think that I would actually draw more value from in-person game stores if the staff really knew about their inventory. And that's a big ask because there's tons of these games. But like if you went in there and there was like a sense of like, I can tell you everything about this game and why you should or shouldn't get it, then you're going there not just for like, because there's inventory, but it's like there's someone there who has insight, and you kind of who's curating stuff.
You want it to be more like Vroman's, where different employees have their areas of expertise. Because I think when I talk, I do the same thing.
What's Vroman's again?
Vroman's that's a famous Pasadena bookstore.
Oh,
and they do a number of staff recommendations. And I think the different staff members might be like, oh, our mystery person is this woman, or and our horror is
exactly.
And then they make recommendations. And I think, just to kind of answer your question, I think probably what you're bonking up against is that all of these stores really make their money on Magic the Gathering.
Yeah.
And so they might know their Pokemon. They might know their Magic. They might not know their David Turksey.
Right. And like there are a lot of games that I don't play, but I'm aware of it because we talk about them or I read about them. Although that being said, there are a ton that I don't know. I'm always surprised. We've been talking about the Golden Geek nominations, this whole host of games.
Still time to vote? There's still time to vote.
Still time to vote when this comes out. Actually, I think the voting closes on May 12th, and this is May 11th. So at this point, who knows? Maybe we're not winning.
Just an honor to be nominated.
Are you listening to us right now?
Listening to us ramble, thinking that this is the best podcast.
You guys, all right. Yeah. Listen to our navel gazing. For best navel gazing, Game Brain. It's just an honor to be nominated. But whoever did win, congratulations.
I know I had some friends start a new game store in Chicago called Goblin Market. And that's the kind of place you go in, they have RPG recommendations. Like they are curating specific, like they have very good deep thoughts about comics and RPGs, a lot of kind of like specific content that they're marketing to a community there. This is not a suggestion for the Game Brain podcast, but I actually think it would be interesting if a game podcast or a store, one or the other, a podcast opens up a store or a store starts a podcast, because I think the act of podcasting does make you have to kind of like being just like a content creator, not just podcasts, YouTube or whatever. There's like I feel like ever since I started on Game Brain, I've been more like attuned to things in board gaming in a way that's different, because I think it's just like, you got to talk about stuff, and we try to be an authority. I don't know how, I sometimes am very sloppy, and I come on and be like, oh, this game by, I don't know who designed it, but someone designed it, so I know this is my fatal flaw. But there still is like an attention to, I think, the board game industry and like games coming out, whatever, that I feel like I'm a little bit more aware of being a content creator now. Yeah. Not to say you can't be if you're not a content creator, but I wonder if you had like, if the Secret Cabal podcast came out with like a game store in Philadelphia. Dice Tower is kind of the obvious one, right?
Dice Tower. But honestly, yes, Dice Tower, definitely. I think there would be a huge amount of value in that, because it's there you have like the nexus of like opinion and
their tastes may not completely align with ours, but I think when people walk in the store, and a lot of people who walk in the store that aren't Ben, but they're walking in and saying, I want a board game for, we're a couple and we want a couple game, or I'm trying to buy a game for my 14-year-old son. Like they want a curated experience.
And I think most games can do that. Like most game shops, if I say like I'm looking for this sort of game, people are always going to be able to make a recommendation at shops. I just feel like it's more like when you pull a box off of the shelf, and I'm like, this is interesting. Is this actually good or is it not good? And someone says, I actually haven't played that yet. I'm like, oh.
But that's almost like the curse of these board game stores a lot of times is the stuff that ends up being inventory is the stuff that didn't sell right away. Whereas like the games that have come out recently that like we want to play right now, a lot of times like they're not on the shelves because they've already sold out. Like that's a real problem with brick and mortar is they end up with all this inventory of games that kind of like didn't make the cut.
Right.
And a lot of times their inventory is like the leftovers.
So, I mean, sometimes, but like for instance, like here locally, Next Gen Games on Pico, it's a really fun game shop. They have had a copy of Key to the City London for years on their shelf. I mean,
Can't sell it. Huh?
Can't sell it. I don't know if it's still there or not. I haven't been in there in about like 2 months, but Key to the City London is like a variation. It's like a more streamlined. Yeah, we played a streamlined version of Keyflower.
Keyflower's good.
I adore it. I think it's a great game. It came out around 2016. It had like some hype around it. Like it was hard to get for a moment and then disappeared. And no one talks about it. And it is like, I absolutely adore this game. And it's just sitting there on that shelf. And there are gems in these places, but
that's still like a hobbyist selection.
It is a hobbyist selection. It would be great. I don't know. I guess it would be great to find that store where people really, they just know. But, nothing that I can do about that right now. It's a big ask. Like, hey, you're a board game enthusiast. Can you open up a store that will probably lose money just because you know the library very well and see if
the answer is probably no.
Yeah.
And the correct answer, a lot of times when you're recommending a game, the correct answer might be, Dixit or Jaws. It's not London Key to the City. It's not Indonesia.
Yeah, it's not. Speaking of Indonesia, were you just making a beautiful little segue there?
I Dimitri'd a little bit there. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. We have a lot to discuss. So tell everyone about the big news with Indonesia.
Just put a link on the website there. I noticed they're going to do a third edition of Indonesia. And go in, you can click on the link and kind of read what this third edition will be because it's not just a reprint. They were considering just doing a reprint and then they kind of looked into it and decided it's time to actually do a revision with new art, new pieces. And listen, Indonesia is my favorite Splotter game. Like I always want to play everything that's Splotter, but then I end up having complicated relationships with these games where like I appreciate them. I don't actually want to play them a lot of times. Indonesia, I want to play. And I really love that game. But the second edition, I think that we've been playing with is very pretty, but like the board is not actually the most functional a lot of times. It has a lot of kind of curvy script. In the lettering that's actually quite hard to read. It's a pretty map, but it's not a functional map. So I'm kind of curious to see what they do. But again, for me, this is the Splotter game I recommend to people because it's in the nice kind of middle spot where it's really streamlined mechanisms.
Yeah.
It doesn't have some of the bloat's not really the right word, but like some of the stuff like horseless carriage, there's just a lot going on there. In Indonesia, I think it's a little bit more compact. It's a little bit more streamlined while still being fascinating in terms of how the game actually plays out.
I've only played it once, actually. It was last year. I really, really enjoyed it. I want to play it more because I've already forgotten how to play it. I remember I really loved it. I still think Food Chain Magnate is probably my favorite.
Sure. Okay.
Or maybe Great Zimbabwe. But Indonesia could probably overtake them. I just don't have the reps. Here are some of the things that are going to be different in the third edition. So there is going to be a new board that has better differentiated borders that are more clear and new icons to indicate what will appear in the regions. I'm reading this off of the website, by the way. There was like a fan-made board of Indonesia that went around. I think Jordan's even printed it out. And
that sounds like Jordan.
Clear, yeah. The goods will be represented by very thick cardboard tokens. So the second edition famously had these it was a mess up at the factory and tokens were just like enormous, didn't fit on the board or really in the box. So now it's going to be cardboard tokens. Ships have been completely redesigned. By the way, the gameplay is all the same. It's just the ships are going to be redesigned in terms they're going to be made out of wood, but they're going to be much bigger than the first edition ships. The company cards have been redesigned to be easier to read. There'll be big cards to use as companies and small indicators to show their location on the map during bidding. So I guess when you're bidding on those companies, you don't have to be cross-checking all the time. Cities will still be glass stones, but they're going to have a little cardboard indicator that you can use to place goods, so it's easier to see what's been delivered to what city, which is good.
Right. That was a little tough to track.
Little indicators to show which player owns which company on the map. That's going to be helpful. A new player aid, which I'm always down for.
You love a good player aid.
A good player aid is essential. And they've changed the name of the TV dinner to the more correct, or parenthetical more correct, Siapsaji.
Oh, well, I thought that's what we always called them.
That's what I thought so, but I think maybe it was just called, I don't know. I don't know. I'm not as experienced as you guys in this, but those are the big changes, and it's available. I went immediately pre-ordered it, and I'm very excited. We're all going to pre-order it, and then we're going to have a bunch of these copies around. And then, unfortunately, I can't seem to play Splatter games outside of Game Brain, so we're just going to have a redundancy of copies. I still want to play more Horseless Carriage. I haven't played that one time, which was really interesting. I feel like it's a game that will blossom with future plays.
I think it's a really interesting game. It's kind of a tough teach, and then it's got the little, like, your market area is both like fascinating and fiddly at the same time. But like if you're anti-fiddly, you're not in the realm of Splatter.
This is
like, it's some of the fiddliest games you will ever find.
And famously, as people on this podcast know, just going back to game stores, one of my greatest game store conquests was being in Lawrence, Kansas, in the middle of America, and walking into a game store next to my hotel, and there was a big, tall copy of Roads and Boats 20th edition just standing there.
It wasn't even like an expansion. You just had you got the full game, huh?
It was the full Roads and Boats, including the etc. expansion, like everything, the full schmagegi, everything.
Real game.
And I got it, and I was like, all right. I found a Roads and Boats out of nowhere.
Now I just have to fit it in my suitcase.
By the way, and I think, that was the big issue. And that's the other thing is, like, I feel like we were constantly, like, with the game store, there's like this feeling, what's going to be inside? It's like when you were telling me about these card games like Star Wars Unlimited or Magic. It's like, what's going to be in the pack? It's like, what's going to be in the store? Is there going to be a legendary?
Right. Do I get a legendary or a rare? Just uncommon games.
Just that. So let's talk about some of the games that we played this week, because we played, it was, again, big Ben and Trey week. So at the top of the week on Tuesday, we played with Jordan and with David. No, Paul.
Oh, Paul. Okay.
Jordan was very eager to show us PAX Penning.
Yeah.
Which is for people who are familiar with the game Turncoats. You know Turncoats? Have you heard about?
No, I do know about Turncoats. And right, so the PAX name here does not actually suggest that it's like in the same realm as the PAX Premier and PAX Renaissance.
I can't speak authoritatively to that because I still don't have
it's not really in that genre. This is more in the genre of games where the board is a cloth map bag and there's lozenges that end up being your pieces. Like, to me this is a whole genre of, like, I'm moving colored lozenges on a cloth map game. And I guess
it's a specific genre that may only have 2 entries in it.
Yeah,
but the designer is one of them. Matilda Simonson, who also designed Turncoats, and Turncoats got a lot of buzz. I think when Shut Up and Sit Down did a big rave review for it maybe a year or 2 ago about this game that just came in like a felt bag with lozenges, and you move things around, but it's incredibly dynamic. And so with these very simple components, you get a huge amount of dynamic gameplay. I think it got people very excited. I've never played it personally.
Right.
Jordan is a huge fan of it.
Right.
He's really into this. But I don't know the PAX genre well enough to say, oh, this is a PAX game or this is not a PAX game. I've only played PAX Premier,
I'm some of the tradition of like what the Phil Eklund originally kind of did these games,
Right,
and
like-
then Cole Worley revised PAX Premier to second
What
edition.
what does it mean to you, a PAX game, in terms of?
I tend to think of them in terms of like they're kind of small box, and the game's going to be played on cards. And like if you think of like the card market as the centerpiece of PAX Premier, where you're taking cards and then that ends up like becoming your tableau. If you play PAX Renaissance, the actual map is actually, I think, just a set of 8 cards that you place out, and so it forms the board by placing out 8 cards. Like the whole game can condense down. Now, PAX Premier does it have a
PAX
cloth
Premier
map?
does. Second edition does have cloth tray.
Cloth map, and it's got the pieces that look like the almost like the all old peanut candies.
I
Or
was
whatever.
say, yeah, it sort of looks like wafers, but bricks.
Yeah. So it does. I guess it has some of that DNA, but listen, I've looked at all of the ratings on PAX. What's the second?
Well, PAX Premier.
No, the one we just played. The
Oh,
Sweden
PAX Penning.
Penning, and the people who really love it love turncoats. And I wonder, like, if you had this kind of base knowledge of, I understand turncoats, now I'm ready for PAX Penning. Like there seems to be a small but very dedicated fan base for these kind of games.
You know, I can't tell. I just did a Google search, and we are going. Here's the definition of PAX games as according to Reddit,
Okay, well,
the authority of all
there you
things. Okay, so this user doesn't have a name; it just is bracket deleted.
deleted says.
This is maybe this is a hot take. They had to be eliminated from Reddit for saying this. A PAX game is a niche part to war games. It's a game where players don't have pieces of their own on the map, yet everyone can move the pieces around, given that they have enough influence cards or coins. They're somewhat complicated to learn and have a very steep learning curve. The end game is terribly opaque because normally you will have victory conditions that rely on having the most prestige on the faction.
Yeah, you
Or
invest
condition
in
of your choice.
factions.
Yeah, that's been my experience. You're
Yeah.
investing in different things, and you're hoping that's going to be the thing that does it. Like, this,
And in PAX Penning, like that is continued, which is like you're essentially setting up a game where it looks like a person can win, but in fact, if someone else has more of their control tokens behind
Yeah.
your screen, they're going to like steal the victory from you. And then there's ways to actually form alliances.
it did remind me, as someone who's not like super into Cold Whirly games or these sort of games, it reminded me like of a Cold Whirly game. Like I can see how these designers are all influencing each other, because there were
multiple endgame conditions. Of
Yeah,
like, hey, we
there's
can
like-
have a Thane's victory versus a people's ending or something like that. Yeah.
Right, like we could be behind the throne, and if the throne wins, then like this cascading victory condition situation happens. But if the king doesn't win, then a different kind of victory condition wins. And which way is it going to go? Which way is going to flop? So it's very, very dynamic, which I think is consistent with the PAX games I've played. I thought this was so. In this game, it's like I think the shtick is that there are these, as you call them, lozenges. Or glass, basically the cities in Indonesia.
Pente beads, essentially, yeah.
Yeah, and so you have yours, and everyone has a shield, a player shield, and you are like acquiring. You have beads of your color and opponent's colors, and like when we do like our end game check, if it looks like if the game is pointing its finger at you, saying like you won, and you like reveal your shield, and someone else has more lozenges, control tokens behind your shield than you do, then they win instead of you.
Steal the win, yeah.
But if you win, then they're no. If you have the most, then you just win. But if someone else has the most, then you look at their shield, and if you have the most in their shield and they're behind their shield, it's almost like you two have created a coalition, so you both win.
Right, you kind of create this loop for a tie. Yeah, or for a shared win.
But then, so there's like. It's one of those games where the game state's constantly changing.
Yeah.
And I actually enjoyed it. Like, it's not a game I would buy. It's not a game I think I would say, oh, let's play it again. But I did enjoy how dynamic it was. And when we were done playing and we are discussing like, why did you do that? Why did you do that? It's like, and Paul's like, well, I started, endorsing the king because Jordan moved the thing along the spaces really far. And that looked like meant the game was accelerating. So I wanted the king's victory. And then I did this and this. And Jordan's like, well, I moved it far because I didn't want it to be on my coins. And then everything had a really fascinating backstory about how we got to the final endgame state, which I appreciated that.
Yeah, I think if the game is played among 4 players that know what they're doing, it's probably pretty interesting. I found a lot of the levers I was pulling, I didn't understand the effect I was having, but that might just be first play problems.
Yeah.
I really like the aspect of you're kind of like investing your tokens behind different screens. People are moving around and handing beads from one player to another. So you're kind of mentally tracking stuff, but there's a lot of uncertainty in terms of
that's fun.
How did the beads move? And like that part I really liked. It was actually more of the levers that we pull. I had a tough time grokking what the levers, like, what does it mean that I'm, advancing these other things down screens, and now I can take one bead from behind my screen and put it on the board. Like, this stuff was kind of like all lost on me. And then there was also like a certain amount of randomness to we're rolling some dice, and if you get doubles, then good things happen.
Yeah, there was like some Yahtzee going on.
There was some Yahtzee going on.
I did very well with the Yahtzee portion.
It was also the case that they have kind of like a cascading action system where you qualify for certain super moves. And then as people take them, they kind of get reset and become unobtainable again. And one of the big moves you can make in the game is like a bishop action where you can take 5 tokens from behind your screen and put it behind somebody else. So this is a big move. But in fact, the game played out relatively quickly so that this only happened twice in the game. And Paul did it twice. And like I never had access to it.
He didn't win.
He didn't win.
He didn't win because guess what?
I remember I think I was the hater on this game where I was very frustrated because I felt like I couldn't do anything.
Yeah.
And so I was frustrated with this. I was frustrated with some of the random elements. And so, but I think everyone else was intrigued of like, hey, I can see that there's something here.
I think it's like a legitimately good game. And I think that it's, the interaction was really interesting. Like, again, it was one of those games that is more like admire than like it didn't hit my sweet spot, but I did enjoy the interaction, and it was quick. I mean, like it took about an hour maybe, and it sort of went along. And what I liked was that my strategy was kind of
you won.
I won. Yeah. That's what I was trying to build up before. I was like, Paul didn't win. I was like, I won. No, but
solo win.
It was a solo win, and actually my win, what I was happy about was that I had basically started playing a meta game where I was like, oh my God, I'm being so overtaken right now. Like, oh my God, I've lost control of my house. I was sort of leading into this way, and I was not. I had actually consolidated all my power, but I knew that if people thought I consolidated my power, people would prevent me from hitting the trigger that would say I could win. And so instead I made it seem like Jordan had actually overtaken my house, and that if he hit the trigger, he might win. And so, basically I was able to con. I felt like maybe I'm overstating my metagame here, but I felt like I was able to con the table into thinking that I was really not a threat and just like sort of lost in my own little space. And then when the trigger happened, I was like, ha, I have it all. Right. I have all the power. I've won. But, so that was an exciting moment for me. Also because I've never lost a PAX game.
Oh, okay.
That's my thing, is that I don't know if I love these games, but
somehow you do well at them. Okay.
Somehow I do well.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to curse it. I probably cursed it now, but like, I think also because they're such interactive games where you have to get into everybody's business. And I find that I actually get kind of overwhelmed by all the decisions that I just kind of like focus on my little corner. And somehow that has worked out well for me, because I think people get distracted away from me.
Yeah.
And then I just do something. I like just focus on building a little thing, and then boom, I just win.
Yeah, I think I had some of it was turn order. Like I was last in turn order, and I didn't understand some of the levers I was pulling. And I think my final 2 actions in the game, I couldn't really do anything. And that was a bad feel for me, such that I was like, you know what, I think other people liked it more than I did. I'm like, I don't need to give this game. This is not your cup of tea. Not my thing. I wouldn't play it again.
I think the interaction was really cool. I think the actual stuff that you do on the game board felt And within initial play, it was like you're just moving a thing down, putting dice. I don't know. I didn't see the anything terribly exciting on the board or cloth, I should say. But it was a first play. Who's to say? Well, then right after that, we played Heaven and Ale. We revisited that one. What did you think revisiting Heaven and Ale?
I was humbled. I think that's a really good game. That was my second play. I'd played it years ago and done quite well. And this is one of those games of like, hey, you think you understand this game now and you're ready to play it, and then you're completely humiliated. That's kind of what happened to me. But I think that's a really interesting game. It falls into the category of kind of like the big rondel, where we're every round we're kind of moving our piece around a map and taking rewards and paying for them. This would be in the same kind of category as Glenmore or Francis Drake or Lignum. Kind of
definitely Lignum.
Kind of in that genre. And I think this is really good. I had a really poor game, but still had a great time. The end of this game was brutal. That was the thing that surprised me, is I had all these plans for the final round and just watched as things that I thought would be easy for me to kind of complete. The options were taken away as people raced for purple lozenges at the end of or purple tokens to trigger
pills.
To trigger, certain pieces on their board
at
the end.
Game.
And so, my game was just crushed at the end. But if your game is going to be crushed, the last round of the game is the proper place to crush it. Right. So it did not really bother me.
Yeah, and like
it's like failing to Reno and Agricola on your final turn. It's like this is the difference in 8 points, and I was just denied.
Yeah,
so I went from maybe playing for the win to completely in last place.
I tried to sort of set up expectations that like this is the sort of game where like one person could get 60 points and one person can get 12 points.
Yeah.
Because it is a crushing game. And there are a lot of traps in it. It's brutally hard. I think it's an excellent game. It is one of my favorite games. I think it's like a modern Euro classic. Personally, I think it should be up there in that conversation. Like I think in terms of like the Euros that came out between like 2015 and maybe 2015 to now. Let's the past 10 years. Let's be wild. Last 10 years. Like I would say this, Red Cathedral. I can't think of others or Kalamala. Like when I'm talking about Euros, I mean, obviously there's Euros beyond that, but like the ones that feel very classic that are like just resources, building things, doing things like that. Like it's not like Great Western Trail, which is like its whole other beast. Just like things that kind of remind us of the Hansa Teutonicas, the Agricolas, whatever. I think Heaven and Ale is a modern classic. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful game, but it did not really light up the board game community the way. Like,
it's beefy. Like it's actually hard. Pretty. Its weight, like its actual rate, is pretty high. And I would not want to play. Like if you have some friends that you feel like can go down AP spirals, I'm not sure you'd want to play this game with them. So I think it's weightier, especially because like with the theme and the art. Heaven and Ale, it looks like it's kind of a medium, light to medium. Like it looks almost like it's Taverns of Tiefenthal, and it is not.
It does.
It is definitely not.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's like, by the way, Marrakesh. I would add into my great Euros of the past 10 years. It does kind of. You're right. It does sort of feel that way. And I remember when it came out, it definitely it was one of those games. To me, it's like the Ice Storm, which is the movie The Ice Storm, which is like very well regarded, like great reviews. People love it. Did well with certain like awards. Never got an Oscar nomination.
0.01% of the population has seen it, but
and then never got an Oscar nomination. Like I think that Heaven and Ale may have even gotten maybe a Kennerspiel nom. I'm not sure, but there were a lot of detractors of it too because it's crushing. It's a crushing game, and every time I play it, it is crushing.
But it might be right for Game Brain audience.
Absolutely. And there is I think a very hard to get expansion, which I only played once a few years ago, which I don't remember much about it, but I think maybe it like eases up some of those rough edges. Cause like there definitely is like at the end, if you don't do certain things, there's no compensation. There's no workaround. Like if you don't get something, you don't get something, and that's just it,
Yeah. And it is one of those games that is always going to be fascinating because there are resources out on the board that we're then all going to compete for. So like the value of something is somewhat determined by what other people think.
Right.
And so who you play with matters. There's no like, here's what you do. Here's your setup. Like maybe with what we're going to get to this with Salton Sea, where there might be a certain sequence of moves that you do.
Yeah.
Like where you have a certain number of openings. Like with this game, I don't think that's even possible because it's almost like a constant auction in terms of how far are you advancing your piece to get what things. So
right.
Like you think some option may be available for you later in the turn. No. Paul's going to jump over there and get that monk.
It's a game full of huge surprises because
so it's a market. Yeah.
It is, yeah, because it's this big track of pieces that you want to get on your board, and there are these like very subtle incentives that are like later in the track that incentivize you to get, like, if you go too slowly, you're going to miss out on some really juicy stuff later on the path, but like if you go too fast, you're going to miss out on buying opportunities, and so the game is. The main interaction of the game is that like
tension
like trying to figure out what everyone's going to need or want, or what do you believe is reasonably going to be there, like where can you push your luck, and there are these moments of like surprise, where like someone will go from the starting space and go all the way around the track, around the like go from basically 12 o'clock to 9 p.m. and like you're like, oh, I thought you were going to stop at like 2 p.m. and you went all the way.
That's crazy, but it still screws me.
Yeah. Like, oh, because I thought that I would, okay. So that changes my plan. And so it's like, it's nail-bitingly tense, I find. And it's also tense just the little puzzle you're working on. So I think that I asked people on our Instagram, by the way, follow our Instagram, Game Brain Pod. I asked people what they thought. One person said, one of my favorite games ever. One person said underrated. One person said, it's a game that is tight in all the right ways, but fails due to its lack of meaningful interaction, in my opinion.
Don't agree.
You don't? Yeah. I don't think I agree either, but I can see what the person's saying, which is that maybe the interaction is not.
You have your own player board that no one has any influence upon, like what's going on your player board. But the pieces that you're populating your board with are things that we are fighting over every single round, and what that fight is. And a lot of games work that way.
Right.
I mean, Agricola kind of works that way. I mean, it's not exactly worker placement, but it's not so different of like, here are the things that are available. What sequence can I do these things to get what I need? And then you're often wrong. Or, things there's scarcity.
It's the sort of, to me, it's the sort of interaction where you're considering what other people might need or want. Like I look at player boards, be like, okay, Jordan's already scored that type of monk, which means that he's not reasonably going to pick up that monk, which means that I think I don't have to rush to that monk right now. By the way, there's pieces that are monks.
They're monks and they make beer.
There are monks.
That's cool.
Anyway, maybe we should revisit Heaven and Ale for the podcast, because like maybe, when we have a week where there's no new fresh games, Heaven and Ale might be a fun one to deep dive. I don't know. Maybe not.
I think we could just kind of recommend it right now.
Just, what? Let's just recommend it. It's just just recommend it.
For the Red Group.
If you find it in a game store, this is the sort of game you might actually find in a game store, and you're like, oh, Heaven and Ale, that looks cool.
Yeah.
It for sure, I would just I think it's an auto buy, actually. And I think it's.
And I had a great time before my dreams were crushed.
Yeah. Yeah. We were a lot of joking, a lot of laughter. The last game before we get into Salton Sea that we must talk about.
Okay.
El Burro.
Yeah.
The sequel to La Granja.
It's almost like a revision.
It's called a La Granja game. In fact, I call it La Granja because someone told me it was La Granja, but I used to call it La Granja.
Yep.
Either way,
there's a J there. If you're looking it up, GRANJA.
Yeah. And the game, it just came out. It just delivered like last week. Yeah. Same designers as so La Granja came out in 2014, 10 years ago.
Yeah. I remember playing it when it first came out at BGG Con, my first BGG Con, I think. First BGG Con? Yeah, first BGG Con. And it's always been a really good game.
Yeah. It's like one of the pillars of my gaming collection. It was an early game in my collection. I played it a million times. It's always been nothing
to
but
me,
great.
It was this great synthesis between a farming game like Agricola and the kind of card dynamics of a Carl Chudik
Yeah.
Because Carl Chuddick games like Innovation, Glory to Rome are famous for, hey, we have these cards, but the way you use the card, there's like 4 different ways to use the card in the game. And that's the heart of these games, is when you choose a card, like I can use it to add another field to my farm, or I can increase my, my pig storage over here, but it's also going to increase my hand size or maybe give me some income, versus, hey, here's a contract, which is the form of a barrow that I'm going to fulfill later on for a lot of points, or it's essentially an occupation. It's going to give me some asymmetrical power that I do. And like how I choose to use this card, and I have a handful of cards, which one am I playing? How am I playing it?
Yeah.
That ended up being really, really interesting.
Yeah.
It's a lot, but it's really interesting.
But it flows very well. Like every round, you do things to your farm, you build out your farm a little bit, you get some income, and then there's
major sequencing.
And then there's like this dice draft that happens.
Well, that's right. Like I'm trying to think, like before this game, like we played a lot of dice drafting games now. I don't remember one before this.
There were definitely dice drafting games. There were for sure.
But this is a dice drafter where you roll the 7 dice, whatever. You're gonna place them around a rondel of 1 through 6 that's gonna have an action associated.
It wasn't
with
even
each
a rondel in the original game. Oh, are you talking about El Burro now? Or are you talking about Lagrange?
Okay, yeah, right.
Well, in Lagrange, in the original one, there were action spaces, and you just put the dice down, and however the dice rolled, those are the spots that were available. There was always 1 extra die, and then that would be like the community action. So there was some decision about like what are the action that I want, what's the action I want to let everyone take, and then you do these actions to help with both your farm and both with helping making these deliveries. And the deliveries, there are these donkeys that you have to use. It's like one of the thematic touches of the game that people always remember is that there's a siesta track, which is basically turn order, but also points. And like you want to go up the siesta track to get turn order, because turn order is massively important. But you also need your donkeys, because the only way to fulfill these contracts, the only way to fulfill these things is deliveries. And so the game is really all about like, how can you build up your farm so that way you can make these deliveries effectively and get points. And when you make a delivery in Lagrange, is that you put a peg in this like central game board, and there's like different spots, like there's a 4 spot, a 3 spot, a 2 spot, whatever. So if you put down a peg that's a higher value than the pegs around it, then they get kicked off the board.
Right.
And there's like points or whatever. It's like a weird area control thing that doesn't really make any thematic sense. It's like you're chasing away your competitors or something.
Right.
It's strange. But that's like just the game. And it was always super fun. And the other thing is that like you'd get these market goods or trade goods. And those trade goods, you could always turn them in for an anytime action that was super powerful. And there was like a variety of anytime actions. And so a lot of the game was about, you get these trade goods, you have these anytime actions that then kind of like lubricate your whole system, and then you're just making all these insane combos by the end of the game.
Right. It's a little bit like White Castle, where like you look at the game and you're like, I'm only going to draft 12 dice really in this. I'm only going to pick 8 dice in this game, and then there's going to be 4 communal dice that I get. That's only 12 actions. That doesn't seem like much. But in fact, you have these, you can do these other little anytime actions all the time, and you end up with these kind of rather elaborate combos where you do a lot of things on your,
because you have all your special powers. Your special powers. So
we're both talking about Lagrange and El Burro here at the same time.
So that's like the base game.
Yeah.
And it's great. And I've loved it. I have it ranked at 9.5 on BGG. I mean, I tend to rank a little, my scores are a little inflated. I'm not one of those people that's like, it's a great game, it gets a 7. There are some people, if you look on, they're like, this is a great game, I love playing it. 7.3. Like, what? But so I personally didn't even think about the game needing any improving. I just didn't. It's just not something I thought about. But the designers, Michael Keller and Odie, that's
can't help you.
Well, they decided to revise. Oh, by the way, I just want to say there is a kind of like deluxeified version of Lagrange that came out about a year or 2 ago for if people are interested.
Okay.
So they came out with El Burro, which takes almost everything that we talked about, and it's sort of like it preserves everything.
It preserved the things that we really loved, and then it kind of identified the things like what were we calling the market square?
Like the market square is gone.
Yeah, but that was the wonkiest, least rewarding part of the game, and they cut it.
Super interesting. They just cut it right out.
Yeah.
And they replaced it with, now we have like a big track. You got donkeys and you're sending them down a path to get to the harbor. And it's this big branching path. And, you know, in a lesser game, I think someone might say it's just a track, but it's a meaningful journey. And you are sending your donkeys down the path and you're getting rewards along the way that are essential, and you're doing all sorts of things. But that's not, I mean, the game, they found a way to take La Granja and just, I don't know, I think make it sublime.
Yeah, the TLDR is like, this is a revision that shaved off all of the edges that we kind of didn't know we didn't love.
Exactly. That's what I'm trying to say.
La Granja,
I thought it was fine, but then
introduce things to make the game more interactive.
Yes.
Including like now, and this isn't going to sound sexy, but now there are goats. There are goats in the game.
Sounds incredibly
and the
sexy.
goats are all about delivering your goods to help other people.
Yeah.
But that actually triggers kind of like some pretty large rewards for you that you get benefits for delivering to other people in a way that introduces almost a negotiation in the game, where you're constantly saying like, hey, Trey, I could really use some food over here. And I'm like, well, that would be good, because if I do deliver that food, it's going to improve one of my anytime actions over there. I'm going to have a good food source here. You know, by the end of the game, that could be worth a lot of points. And so you get into a negotiation now where the game feels more interactive.
Yeah. The fact that you can deliver to other people and fulfill their needs is like,
you kind of need to.
And I
just can't just put your head down,
because when you do that, you then there's basically like a tech tree. It feels like a tech tree where if I deliver grapes, I get to go up the grape track.
Yeah.
And if I deliver food, I go up the food track.
Ham.
And then when you like to go up these tracks, you get to improve your anytime actions. And now the anytime actions, you don't have trade goods, you just have workers, and you just assign the workers, but then you have to pay for the workers at the end of the round. Otherwise, they basically clog up that action. You can't use it the next round. So really, really impressive tweaks to the game.
This game has and La Granja too, but this game even more so, I feel like it has the thing that Agricola has, where you start with everybody starts with an identical farm, but then very quickly it's going to get asymmetrical.
Yeah, because the cards.
And you're going to play like 4 cards right at the beginning. And so like there's a little bit of like, how do I make these 5 cards in my hand work in the best combination? But it's impressive how much your game evolves very quickly, where like at the beginning it doesn't feel like you're doing much, and then later on in the game you're pulling off these really large moves, and if you've done it well, your farm is a really well-tuned engine that's spitting out the resources you need to deliver the contracts, that's rewarding you in the ways.
It's like it really is an engine builder, but then like I think the fact that like very early on you get an asymmetric power. Essentially, you slot in a card onto your farm, and that's your power. And then when you can find a card that like synergizes with it, it feels even better. Which
again is kind of an Agricola thing, like the occupation. Well, I call those occupations, but like your unique asymmetrical power. Like, how do you leverage that? Yes, it's good, but can you actually find things that are going to really leverage that to its fullest?
Yeah, and it feels it's like very exciting. And we only played 2 of the 4 rounds on Thursday because it took us like 45 minutes to unpack and unbox, and
we had to punch
and that took a long time, and
we were kind of like learning the game from the rules.
It was I had read through the rules, but like teaching them, in retrospect, I think I could teach it much faster now. But like, so we basically didn't start to 9:30, 9:45, 10, I don't know, was it 10?
We didn't have our first roll actions until 10 o'clock.
So then we played
got
until
to 12:30, 12.
Yeah, that's when
and we were only halfway through the game.
And then we stopped, and then I went out to a party. Which I'm like, at 45, that's not something I don't normally go out at 12 anymore. But
so if there is a negative on El Burro, it's that it is not the quickest game. It will be a substantial teach.
And there's a lot of AP. I felt like the game last night that was being played at Tom's, it looked like there was a huge amount of AP that was happening there.
Yeah.
And I think playing
they
it,
didn't finish till 2 o'clock.
Yeah, I was like playing it. I was like, okay, I know I'm not going to play this game if someone is prone to having AP, and there are people that have that. I'm just not going to play. I've decided, and that's sort of like my mentality going forward these days.
Yeah.
Is like if someone has AP, like really bad AP, where I can see that this game is going to just like shut them down, I'm just not even going to play it with them, and that's just going to be it. But
I was thrilled. Like I was having such a good time while we were playing.
It was almost like halfway through that first round, I was like, oh yeah, this is
Elder.
so fun.
Elder's on his 6th play of the game.
Yeah,
I think he said he's loving it, but he's also like, this game presents a very difficult puzzle. Where he was talking about, I think he won the game last night with the other group, but his score was in the kind of like the low 80s, and he's been playing with other players where a winning score is typically between 100 and 120, and like he really hasn't cracked this kind of low 80s barrier. So there's still a lot of game that he needs to kind of comprehend and struggle with, and I think that's part of like this is a really interesting puzzle. Like we're gonna get to the puzzle of Salton Sea in a second here, but like the puzzle of El Burro is a meaty, delicious puzzle to work out.
I loved those first 2 rounds so much that I'm already flagging that this could be an early contender for like a top 5 game, top 3, maybe even a top. I don't know. You know, it's hard
for
to say.
For the year or for all time, Ben?
The year.
Okay,
Let's.
right.
But I'm like, this game is this. It just feels like I was like, I don't think there's a single thing that I'm missing from the original game. Not a single thing. I don't think like, oh, I wish they had kept this thing that they should.
Yeah, I didn't have that thought.
There was not the choice of donkeys versus siesta is its own mini game that's like very difficult and very fun. And I told Elder, I was like, oh, we played the first 2 rounds. It was great. He goes, wait till you get to the end game. I was like, really? He's like, mm-hmm. I was like, I was like, wow.
Because we didn't do any boat deliveries.
Well, we didn't even, there was still so much game left to be had. Yeah. We didn't even get to, there's like a barrier that we didn't get to. There was like a personal achievements to unlock. There's just all this. It's a much bigger game than what the original one. Much bigger. But
it was already a big game.
But it just felt like you were going, you had finally graduated from a Toyota to like a BMW.
And to be clear, like I don't think there's any chance this has the potential to be a breakout hit the way that like Arc Nova is. It's not that accessible. But for heavier gamers, like there's a lot of great game here.
Yeah, and like the way it looks, it looks very nice. It kind of reminds me of like it's like the color palette of like Frog and Toad, the children's book. Okay. Kind of like the green and brown. It's very pastoral like that, but it's also that's kind of a Spielworks thing too. Like Spielworks loves kind of like muted, a washed out kind of green vibe. So like I feel like whereas something like Arc Nova is very vibrant and like with photos or photorealistic drawings or whatever, and so that
But this is pretty. But I think also like somebody wandering up at a convention and looking at El Burro, I don't think you'd have a clue what's going on.
Yeah. And again, there's not a lot of animals, but there are goats and donkeys. Like I think if they made
it's my favorite goat game.
If they really had centered those, like really had, I think leaned into the goats, I think people would go nuts over it. I think people would love it. If there were like little goat meeples, there's no reason to have a goat meeple, but if there were, that would be fantastic.
It's true. We do have two donkeys. Why don't we have a goat?
Either way.
So I think we're gonna try to review that in a couple of weeks. Elder and I will probably do a review.
I'm so sad. I'll be in Europe.
Okay.
You can just add this to whatever thing you say in the review. I'll be like, I totally agree. It's a great game.
All right. Do we want to talk about Salton Sea?
Yeah. Let's talk about Salton Sea. So Salton Sea, as we mentioned earlier, it's a small box Devere game.
Small box, but not a small game.
Yeah, it's about the same size as the White Castle for people who know that.
Do you want me to pitch it?
I was just going to say who the designers are, and then
you
can pitch it. Designer is David Bernal, and artist is Emilia Salas. Sales. I don't know if it's Salas or Sales, but I'm assuming it's Salas.
I don't know.
And it came out this year, 2024. Okay.
Yeah.
Pitch it.
So the pitch in this game is that each player is put in the role of essentially almost like a wildcatter, where you're a small company that is going to be extracting brine from the Salton Sea and then converting it to either lithium batteries or geothermal energy, and then reselling that to the kind of larger, energy companies that are then going to like sell it to the rest of the world. So there's a certain number, like on a certain level where we have a number of actions that we can take in order to kind of like reserve different plots of the Salton Sea, and then we're going to dig down and mine it, then we're going to extract that brine, and then we're going to convert that brine. Each of these requires a different action. And the thing that is probably most unique about this game is their system of actions that is the same as money. You start with 7 cards that have actions on them. There's a number of actions you can just kind of like do on your player board, but then you have 7 actions which are improved versions of those actions that are on your player board. But those 7 actions are also $1 money. So every single time, a little bit like Nucleum, you're making a decision when you spend money of like, which actions am I giving away when I spend money? Then when you get money from like selling these goods, you're getting new cards that might be in $1 denominations, $3 denominations, or $5 denominations. And the backside of this money has an associated action that you can take that might be very powerful. In the case of like a $5 action might be a significant discount. Every round you have a certain number of workers. It's not worker placement in that I'm competing with certain spaces with other people. You're actually taking actions only on your own board, but how you sequence your actions can be incredibly important.
Yeah, it is. I'll just say it. It's a crushing.
It's a crushing economic game.
It's like it makes heaven and ale just look like
loosey-goosey,
Candyland. It is. It makes. I mean, it is up there with like Evacuation in my book of like a difficult game in terms of like, oh no, I've messed up. Oh no, I
gave away the wrong card. I'm $1 short.
I'm short. I don't have anything. I don't have the money. What do I do? It's one of those games.
Yeah.
It is. It's a really interesting game.
It has some stock things where we invest ourselves. We start to buy shares in the companies that we're like selling to.
There's an economic element of it that
There's going to be like 5 different goals that we're all racing for at the end of the game that we're kind of competing on that'll score us points.
There's research that we can get that's going to give us permanent powers
and a lot of times the things where the player interaction in this game enters in is that the cards that are available each round are actually kind of finite. So because it's not a worker placement and we're not competing over the same actions, what we are competing is like there's a number of races in the game. But like also
first one to be able to store
3
up
geothermal
energies.
Yeah. You're expanding your business. But the thing where the most of the interaction is like there's these finite number of cards that are out there each round. Some of them are going to be very desirable, and you're racing to get them before they disappear because like your options start to go away. Unlike a game like Through the Ages where the cards are constantly refreshing as they're taken, so new options are appearing. Like the refresh doesn't happen until the end of the round. So you're seeing these potential for things that you can do, and often they're disappearing before you can kind of get around to getting them. So you're often frustrated by the player right in front of you taking the card that you felt was key to your strategy going forward.
And those cards can also include, like, it's not just action cards, it's research, it's contracts, it's these like rock cards. It's cards that like represent rock that you can drill into, or I should say
these
land.
like land plots that you can extract brine from.
The bed of the Salton Sea. So yeah, that is where the bulk of the interaction comes from. Is the you're trying to nab these things before someone else does, but the act of nabbing something is so difficult because, as you said, all of our action cards are money. So if you want to get those action cards, that means you need to make money.
Yes.
You need to do something that gives you a payout. Or some of the cards require you to buy them, like the land plots or the research. That means you need to have the money to get them. And the thing is that money, it's tight. It's tight. And it does not flow easily. And so like you could be eyeing something.
And it can be anguishing of like, I need to spend $2 here, but I don't want to lose any of these cards.
Yeah.
But you have to.
It feels like that classic thing in a dream where you're trying to like you're trying to get somewhere and you're running and you just can't seem to get to it, because you will have a card that will just sit there for 2 rounds and you're like, I'm just trying to get to it. I'm trying to get to it. And you finally get everything in order.
In front of you.
Yeah.
And then Paul buys it.
And then Paul buys it.
Yeah.
Or Tom.
I think this game is also in the way, one way to think about this game is like, maybe it's not a good Splotter comparison, but we have a player aid and your own player board where there's about a dozen different actions you can take. Mm-hmm. They define what all these things are. I mean, some of them are like, hey, you're drilling down. Hey, you're extracting brine. Mm-hmm. Hey, you're converting your brine. Hey, you're fixing your machinery. You know, like there's all of these different options. And so almost like Roads and Boatish, you have this menu of things you can do. Mm-hmm. And when you were first playing this game, the number of choices can be quite overwhelming because like a splatter game, like you really can't blow it on the first round of this game.
You can. You know what's so funny? I was not overwhelmed by the choices. But what I'm overwhelmed by are the opportunities that come up in the middle of the game. Like I think that there's a very simple loop that you have to do in this game. The loop is you drill. You take one action to drill. You take another action to extract brine out of the place that you just drilled from. You take another action to convert that brine into a battery or geothermal energy. And you take another
and
then you take another action to sell it or fulfill a contract.
Yep.
And at that point you can like maybe use that money to buy research, or you use that money to repair your machinery, and then do it all over again. It's like a super simple loop. And so to me,
it feels like you're operating a business doing this.
To me, it's like you take your car and you just go on the on-ramp. But it's like, just as it's simple to drive from here to downtown LA, you just get on the highway. What if, like, it turns out there's traffic and like,
do I take surface streets?
Maybe I need to take a surface street. Or
do I stop and get coffee?
Yeah. Or it's like, oh, Waze has just suggested an alternate route. Like maybe I get off at this exit and go that way. And what happens is it's not even that you get distracted off the path. Sometimes you can't continue on the path because you have run out of money, or it's just the loop is so tantalizingly simple, and yet just executing it is very difficult.
Yeah. And sometimes there does seem like there is kind of a central loop you want to do, that pursue, where you have some options doing it. I think you've been pretty determined to explore the space.
Yeah.
And see like, hey, do I have to pursue what appears to be kind of like the core mining loop? And like so far your explorations into kind of like zagging when other people are zigging have not achieved great results.
Have I wound up in 4th place both games? Perhaps. No, but well, the first game, I mean, I was zagging, but I don't think I knew I was zagging. I was just trying to get my bearings.
Right.
In a game that we played with you, me, Tom, and Paul, you know, the emergent meta seems to be, don't go for the contracts early on, because the money
return is so poor.
The money return is poor, and you get bumps for your business. There's a business track, which is incredibly important because it unlocks workers, but it also opens up warehouse space. Yeah. And you need that warehouse space so badly, because if you can't store that extra brine or the extra geothermal, then you can't fulfill the contracts. And therefore, if you can't fulfill the contracts, it's just, I can't describe it. It's just awful. It's literally, it's literally like, if I'm going to continue my analogy, it's kind of like opening up the warehouse is, I guess, like putting a tire on your car. I don't know. Like you need your wheels. So I don't know if that's a good analogy.
Like you're leveling up your company.
Right.
And you got to do it.
Yeah.
And that's part of the advantage. I think that Paul was able to level up his company kind of early here. It's that gave him an action advantage, capacity advantage.
And so to get back to what I was saying is with the contracts, it takes a lot of money and time and effort in the beginning of the game to convert your brine into like a battery or into geothermal energy. And when you sell it on the open market, if you can get like $6 or $7 from it, that's like a lot of money, but it's also like you're immediately accessing better cards for better actions. Whereas if you do it if you use those resources to fulfill a contract, you'll get maybe $3, which is not nothing. It's still good. and you'll get some bumps up your company path. So that will maybe unlock your warehouse a little bit more, get you another meeple, but you don't have that liquidity.
Yeah.
And
that liquidity is really important.
So what I was trying to do was push against the meta that says you have to sell things first before you start thinking about contracts. And I was like, no, I'm going to go with contracts first.
See how it goes.
And what I've learned, what I believe my working theory is, if you're doing the contracts game first, I think it's an advanced play. I'm not going to say you shouldn't do it first, but I think you have to really know what you're doing in this game, because this game is full of traps.
Hasn't worked out yet.
Yeah, it has not worked out. And I think the reason why is you get so little money that I think that the action card that you take for your money, you have to be very intentional about it. Like you have to say, I'm going to get this card and I'm going to use this as the cornerstone of my engine.
That's right.
And because what I did was I got a $5 card, which is the best kind of card, and then I used it twice in the game.
Yeah.
And so that's like a lot of energy.
It's not a formula for victory.
Right. It's a lot of energy and
maybe I didn't explain it especially well. Like one of the great things about getting that $5 card is like it's got this really powerful action on it. When you take the action on the card though, like that's $5 you don't have, at least not this round.
Yeah.
So like it eliminates your ability to buy things because that $5 is inaccessible. But you did use it for a really great action. Maybe that gave you a $3 discount on buying a science tech that it's going to pay off for the rest of the game. And then you're going to get that $5 card back at the end of the round, and you can use it as money or you can use it as a great action again. Right. And that tension of like, hey, I'm going to use this in action, but then I don't have that cash to spend. Like it often is the case of like, hey, I've used these great actions. Now I have no money. I can't do the things that I thought I was going to do. Like, there's a fun tension there.
It's the best tension. And there's not a lot of Euro games that say, okay, take these resources, upgrade these resources, sell them, use that cash, and now you've got a cash and don't do anything with it, essentially. It's like normally you say, oh, I've got more cash, so now I'm going to invest in more resources and do more upgrading and get bigger and bigger and bigger. But in this game, it's like you just got your cash. And guess what? You don't want to touch that cash because now you want to use it for action. So guess what? You're just as poor as you were before, if not poorer. And now you got to do something else. But now you only have $1, whereas you started the last action with $6 to start off. So like you're holding on to that $5 action because it's so valuable. You work so hard for that card.
But this is what the liquidity that we were talking about of like having the money is like, it doesn't feel like spending $2 or $3 extra bucks would be a big deal. But in fact, a lot of times that's just the difference that you need to be able to kind of have your plans play out. And so focusing specifically on money early on seems to be like, this is how the game is played.
I do think it's like important to sell things in the beginning. And like, again, there was a thread on BGG that was like, what's the point of buying stocks? It seems like contracts always win. And like our experience has been that actually the people who've invested in the stock market have always won.
Done pretty well.
Yeah. But I guess that's different.
But even
selling.
then, like you need to invest in the right thing. Like I made some investments in a company that ended up being worthless. Mm-hmm. So that's not great.
So by the way, there is interaction. We were talking about interaction. Yeah. There is interaction in that stock market, but it's not like an 18xx. But I think the interaction is similar to Sky Mines, perhaps, where
that's right. Yeah.
You want to buy stocks early while they're cheapest.
That you expect to go up.
Right. Yeah. But then people will be less inclined, I think, to try to sell to those. They might still, but they might be less inclined.
But there was definitely at one point, like certain players were working to pump up the blue stock because we were all invested in it, and you weren't.
Right.
Right.
I was not, because my money was all
zagging.
tied up in but my money was tied up in those contracts. And so there's like an element of like you want to invest in the track that you know is going to get you a return, but by the time you know it's going to get you a return, then it's very expensive. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of like, do you want to do
where it's like Tom had enough of an economic engine that even buying in late was worthwhile.
Right.
To him. Like he was able to successfully convert money near the end into points.
Yeah.
You know.
The thing that's interesting about that stock market is that there are three companies. There's a red, yellow, and blue company, and the red company has the cheapest shares, but their upside in terms of value is the lowest. And then the blue company has the most expensive shares, but that has the most
payouts.
upside.
Yeah.
But then there's also these little rewards as you go up the track. You can get these
Significant little rewards.
significant little rewards that you can get if you're like the first one to a place. And the ones on the red track are worse, and the ones on the blue track are strongest. Do you think that's a good design in terms of like, is there like a rich getting richer element about going up the blue track, even though it's more expensive? Like,
It's too soon to tell. I mean, I think one thing that happened in the game yesterday was we had played the game previously. I had won the first time we played pretty significantly. And so when I invested in the red company, I think there was a certain amount of counterplay there of like, I think, Tom made some decisions early on of like, I'm going to take $1 less to not pump up the company that Trey got an early investment in.
Right.
And that might have been like the right decision where I could see it going a different direction where red could have gotten pumped up quite a bit, and it didn't happen. It also was the case that one of the endgame rewards rewarded investment in blue and did not reward investment in red. And so that's going to push things that direction.
Or I guess my question is, it's not so much rich gets richer, but like, why would you, like, what is the motivation in investing heavily in red if like it's not going to get as many endgame points? I mean, they're cheaper, yes, but like, you're putting is it more like they're more guaranteed? It's like it's a shorter track also, like the
It's
value,
very affordable to buy. Like you could buy into red for next to nothing at the beginning. So, but you're spending an action to do so.
But you can get the free actions sooner. Whereas the blue track is just...
but actually no, like you actually kind of have to go further and the rewards are not as significant in red. So I don't know that that's completely balanced. I don't, we're getting a little bit into the weeds of like the balance here. What I would say is, like, in a sense, this should not be my kind of game, because I think what the game we played yesterday was a good example of 4 different people playing a puzzle game. That was very engrossing. Like we haven't played this solo, but I bet the solo game would be really interesting to play. And I think everybody was kind of like doing their own thing. And there was a degree of interactivity in terms of the things that we were competing for. But on the scale of things, this is a low interactive game. Like the pleasures are in working your own puzzle and squeezing the most value out of your engine as you do it. And I would not think that would appeal to me, but it did.
I think it's because the puzzle is so incredibly strong here.
Yeah.
And it's there's so much intensity that I think for me, you can excuse maybe the lower interaction. Again, I'm also not quite as sensitive to high end. Like if sensitive sounds judgmental. I'm not as, like, if a game is less interactive, it doesn't bother me that much.
Yeah, usually it does me.
If a game is, if a game is not very interactive and then the puzzle's also not very interesting, then I'm like, well, I'm just doing stuff. I'm just moving stuff around over here, and I'm not even dealing with anyone. But here, the puzzle's really good. And I said last night that I feel like in some ways the interaction in this game is that we're all groaning together. It's like I'm like, oh my God, this fell. And then you hear Paul go, oh no. And you're like, that was me too. It's like group bonding. It's like we're all being tortured by this game together. And the interaction is like us going through this miserable experience together.
Yeah, it's like group therapy.
But like miserable in the best way.
You traded away the wrong card.
Like I feel like that is, but I think it's not incredibly, it does not have a huge amount of interaction. And by the way, Paul sent a text that I'm going to read.
Okay.
That this is his thoughts. He said, thinking about Salton Sea, I think there is a trend in brutal multiplayer solitaire that's making its way in game design that, as a high interaction person, I'm liking. Inventions is similar in its action selection restrictions that you cause yourself. I wonder if this is response to people who don't like direct aggression but want a brutal experience. Anyway, use this on the pod as you will, and also say that Tom is a cheater / pumpkin eater.
There was a minor asterisk in our game where I may not have taught a rule. That's probably so. Tom was taking actions.
You taught it well, but it was it's one of those rules that you taught that's easy to sort of like get a notion about it into your head, and then
like in the way this game is granular, and the way that it simulates this business, it can be really interesting. Like one of the things you can do when you're converting your brine into other goods is essentially like you can work your workers overtime. Like you can, like it's sometimes you're damaging your drill bit by drilling through rock. There's also like, we're going to work our workers extra hard, and if we do this too often, you will not be able to make them do any more work until you have paid to repair all the damage you've done to the company. And Tom had done this. He had overworked his workers, and in fact, so he could not be converting anymore brine going forward. But the way he had understood it was like, oh, well, once I've overworked them, I can't ask them to do any more overtime.
I can't do any more overtime, but I can still do my basic working. So he was able to get he was able to convert his brine into some high level stuff.
So it was a minor rule misunderstanding, but it ended up being like
it's a significant
having to
thing.
spend the money and the actions in order to repair your business. Like it slows down your tempo tremendously.
And to be able to get a battery when you're not entitled to a battery is like, it really does affect the game.
Because that was often the case of like, oh, I'm not even going to be able to do this thing. Like, I don't have the money. I have to wait till the next turn till I get my cards back. So it could have major tempo implications.
Yeah, and he wasn't doing it like maliciously. I think that actually the takeaway from it though is that if you play this game, you should keep an eye on what people are doing, because just make sure that people are not messing up things like that. Because it really can, it affects it, and like it does have like a pretty big effect on the game, right? Like if someone has more cash than they're supposed to have, that's a very big deal in this game, because this game is incredibly tight. In fact, I think that the big criticism that I seem to have gleaned from other reviews and other people talking about it is like, this game is so tight, it's not fun for me.
Right.
And I would love to hear what you think about the tightness of the game. Is it too tight, or is it right?
I don't think it's too tight. I do think that, like, I think the tightness is a good thing. I think the problem is that your first play is going to demonstrate a bunch of brutal lessons, so that on your second play
and third and fourth,
you'll understand. But even then, I think you were zagging, like you were trying to explore the space rather than being like, hey, I know this central loop thing I can do is kind of like where I should start and then deviate from. So I think like, and this is weird because I'm kind of unforgiving of the Swedish PAX game, where I'm like, hey, if I understood this better, maybe my second play would be a lot better. Whereas here, I'm like, hey, once you've got one of these games under your belt, you'll understand how to not step in the mines, the mines that are laid for you in the first turn.
There's a difference between like playing a game and then discovering the traps, but still kind of generally seeing what you're supposed to be doing with the game, versus a game where you're like, I don't even know what I'm supposed to be doing in this game.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I think a lot of people's first experience with this game, it's going to feel like having a shovel hit you in the face, and that,
I love it.
The shovel has hit me in the face, and now I have to take my third just take $1 action because I'm completely illiquid. I can't do anything. It's like when your older brothers, wrestled with you and now saying like, why are you hitting yourself? Like it's that game can feel that a little bit.
I got the shovel in the face. I stepped on the rake. I fell into the net. Like I did. Like this game is it's all those things. But
right. And like when we were teaching it the second time, you were like, hey, this one action here where you can just take $1. You guys think you're not going to need this, but watch, you're going to need this. But Paul and Tom actually like took my early advice about prioritizing money, and like they never had to do it.
Yeah. I actually did it. I think I did it 2 or 3 times. Oddly enough,
spot. It's a fail spot.
Oddly enough, it's kind of a fun spot because you have to do like kind of a blind draw, and you're like, what action do I get? And like, you're like, oh, this isn't what I wanted, but I could use it. And then one time when you do get the thing you want, you're like, yes. But I think you have to find the humor in this game too. I think you have to go into this game knowing it's going to be brutal and be like, try to be amused by that.
I have the right metaphor here.
Yeah.
Okay. This is going to be a total Gen X metaphor. Excite-a-Bike. Excite-a-Bike used to be a stand-up video game.
Excite-a-Bike was a stand-up video game, like in an arcade.
Yeah, in the arcade, which you're on like a dirt bike and you're doing ramps, and you kind of like you get your speed up, and if you do it right, you got your speed up, you make the jump, you land on the back side, you carry all that momentum into the next jump, you make that jump, you carry all that momentum.
That flow.
You're like skipping other stuff, you're in the flow, it's all working for you. So you're riding that wave.
Yeah,
where
so
like it's
good.
all working out for you. But in Excitebike, if you
They
mess
just call it
up,
Excitebike, not Excitebike.
is it? I thought it was Excitebike. You think it's just Excitebike?
I'll look it up.
Excitebike. I don't know. But like, if you bonk and you land just short on that ramp where you didn't make that first jump, and now you have to like get all your speed back up for that second jump, and you don't really have enough speed to make it on the second jump. Like, and so again, the shovel's just hitting you in the face. This is that game where like if you
your bike.
if you stay on the right side of the money wave,
Yeah.
then like all things are possible. If you get on the wrong side of that wave, it's shovel in the face time.
Yeah, and I think I think it's really important to be amused by the traps. I think it is. It's because it is incredibly funny when you're like, I can't do anything. Like you could say, I'm being punished right now. This game isn't fun. This game is trying to like, this is like, I can't do things. What's even the point of playing this game? You could have that mentality. Or you can say, I've made a mess. This is hilarious. Can I even claw my way out of this? And you can, you can get it going again, but it's hard. I think the reason why I think the game is tight in the right ways. I think it is really tight, but it has to be tight. If the game is not tight, I don't think you have meaningful decisions about your money.
Yeah.
I think you have to really, like, if you can just get if you can just easily get $1 here, $1 there, then you can be like, okay, I'll save these dollars for actions, this for money. And then you're just playing a basic game where you have your special action spots and you have your cash. It has to be so tight that the choice between keeping your cash and for actions or spending it is meaningful. A constant meaningful question. And it's it feels sometimes like every turn is like the end game state, and you were like, I have to figure out how this is going to work, which is a good and a bad thing. It's great decision space. I will say the AP is pretty intense. I felt like last night's game was a little hard for me because I often knew what I was going to do, and I felt like, to be honest, all three of you guys were taking a very long time. You guys were all really thinking things through. Paul normally takes very quick turns. He was taking forever. Tom was taking forever. You were taking forever.
But that's kind of the sign of a good puzzle.
Exactly.
But I might only want to play this 3.
But I'm just saying, like, that's just something people should know.
Yeah.
Like, again, don't play this. Like, it's giving people who are pretty quick turn takers, like, it was slowing.
Yeah.
And by the way, I've taken very long turns. I just happen to know exactly what I wanted to do. And so when you know, it's one of those things, like when you know what you want to do and you just have to sit there and wait, it can be brutal. And I just tried to use that time to kind of like think things through and decide what I'm going to do next, and like just still try joke with people at the table.
Yeah.
But just be aware, like it
can be a little head down.
The puzzle is intense because it's so tight,
and it's so
everything matters. And I just want to talk about, like, one thing is the puzzle is tight because there are really intense considerations. Like, you could, if you get $6, if you do something, sell something, and you get $6, even the mere act of how you are going to receive $6 is a significant choice.
It's a decision. Yeah.
Do I get a $5 card that's going to be a great action, but it's only one card? It gives me no flexibility in terms of purchasing power.
Yeah.
Now if I have a $3 purchase, I don't want to waste up a whole $5 card. Do I get some $3 cards? Do I get 3 and some ones? How do you break that down? Is it better to have
Depends
6
on what's
ones?
there.
Is it better to have a single 5?
Generally.
And then there's issues with your research. Is it better to get a permanent power, or is it better to get something that's like an immediate use that cycles out at the end of the round, and then you can do more?
This is the richness of the game, but it can take some time.
It can take. There's a lot.
The game is a little bit in danger of overstaying its welcome. Like it didn't really overstay its welcome, but I felt like if it's ended,
I thought it was just right.
Yeah, it's close to being just a little bit longer than it should be.
I wonder if it would speed up, like, with more awareness as people get in their tempo. It slows down the most when you fall out of your tempo, because then you got to figure out, what do I do? How do I get this working?
Yeah.
If you're in your tempo, you're just like, I'm going to do this and then this and then this. And by the way, when you get your combo and you get things going, it's like exhilarating. When things are going, it's like, if everything's flowing. I think it's definitely a tempo game, like getting your tempo right.
Yeah. So I think this is I'm definitely recommending this game, but it's kind of like, understand what you're getting into, know your group, This
Yes.
may not be for everyone.
Wait, there are some things I do have to also talk about. I
didn't mean to wrap it up. I'm
no,
just
it's
saying.
okay. That's something that's important. We're really only talking about the gameplay experience. We have to talk about presentation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the upside of one thing that's really fun about this game is that this is a really heavy game in such a small box. Like probably one of the
Congratulations.
Yeah, probably one of the heaviest games I've gotten from such a small box. Like dense, intense. Yeah. But because it's a small box, you have small box game issues, which is that some of that font, the text is so small.
Yeah, especially when it comes to like the text. Yeah, like some of the rewards on the text.
The rewards are like you can't tell if it's a cost. You can't tell. So costs are all in red, but there's the stock track, which is also there's a red stock track. So it's like, is that a stock bump? Is that a reward? Or is that a cost? It's really hard. There's things. Some cards have a subtle gray line, which indicates that like you can do this action or not, but you can miss it completely. The rule book has a lot of soft grays in it. It is.
I've struggled to read some of the pieces. It is
actually. I don't. It's very, very difficult to read, and I feel like this is one of those things where I applaud DeVere for getting this into such a small package. But either like, I know they want to get more art in there because it's there's so much like whiteness in the game that they want to get some flavor art, but like some of that is just too difficult.
The look of the game's quite nice. It's just that I struggled to read. I think like your actual player board, once you've gotten the explanation, it makes a great deal of sense. Like I think it's quite well designed.
Very well designed, but like there's actually an accessibility issue here that could make it frustrating for players and could wind up like you bring this out and it could wind up being a bad experience for someone purely because they can't read it very well and they mess up things. And that's a real consideration.
I had to a number of times in the game stand up, lean well over the board, take out my reader glasses in order to get down to that fine print on the tech cards. And I remember feeling like, I don't even want to look over there because I can't read any of it.
And I think that they muted some colors to try to make it not busy. So I appreciate the intention behind it, but I think that the game, if there's a second edition or something, I think that they need to do a little bit better in terms of readability. I thought the rule book, I actually really like the rule book.
Yeah.
I think the rule book is organized very, very well. And there's examples for almost every single thing. I think we barely had any questions, any ambiguities.
We had some ambiguities about start player.
Start player, because there is a start player issue. Not issue, but there's a start player.
And there's also like
method.
There should be like a start player token.
And there is none.
Yeah. BGG has cleared this up. We thought the game, like once the game started, it just keeps kind of going clockwise for the rest of the game. But given that you have some players have more actions than others because their companies have been more developed, like that doesn't really work. You actually need to have a new player be the first player every round and have that rotate so you have kind of equal opportunity to buy cards early.
And there's like
and there's no way to track that currently.
Right. And there's like also a whole bunch of fussiness that happens at the end of a round in terms of cleanup. I actually kind of wish there was like another side player board. You have like, I think 5 rows of cards that can be up to 6 cards each, plus discard piles that have to be moved and shuffled. And the cards start to spin, and it gets messy and annoying.
Yeah,
and
you were doing a lot of work at the end of each round.
Oh my God.
And that's time you're not spent thinking about what you want to do.
That was driving me nuts because I'm sitting there and I have to do like move this whole thing and then get this shuffle, put this under here. And you're sitting there and you're doing row after row, and you guys are just staring at the cards and you guys are like learning. I need to look at these cards. I mean, there's plenty of time to see the cards, but you sort of have this feeling of like, this is taking forever. I don't know how you accelerate that, but I think just having a maybe like a nice little sideboard would have been nice. But those are really my only quibbles. But I do think the readability is an issue. But aside from that, though, I think this is a game that is not going to be for everyone because I think it will crush a lot of people.
Yes.
But I think if you're into that,
if you're into being crushed,
if you're into a game that like is tough, and people said the same thing about Evacuation. People were like, it feels like work. But if you enjoy that stress of like getting out of
there's a little bit more pleasures. Like when you're excite biking, when you're riding the wave, it does feel really good.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's the fun of these games. It's like, yes, it does. It can be very tough, but that's by design. It's almost like a test of mettle to see like, can you ride the
How
wave?
many shovels to the face can you survive?
Yeah, can you hit those jumps? Can you hit the R jump in Excite Bike? You know the R jump, the big one that goes up and then up again.
Okay, yeah,
you know that one.
Maybe I wasn't very good at that game.
I mean, I used to play it all the time on my Nintendo. And like when you fall off the bike, you press A and B together, I think, really fast. So you can run to the bike faster.
Right.
Oh,
it's all coming back now.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So I think, where do we stand on this? We think I recommend it. I think it's a great game.
Yeah, it's a recommend. I think the audience for this is pretty narrow. I don't think it's going to be on one of my best of the year lists, but I think it's solid and that people should check it out.
Yeah.
Especially the cards as money / action space thing is, and I think a lot of reviews have said that. It's like, that's the thing, like, oh, this is really new. This is exciting. Check this out. I think the overall puzzle is quite nice. It's not going to appeal to every kind of gamer.
Yeah. I actually have one thing I would like to say. That a reason why I do recommend this game, aside from the fact that it's punishing, it's like fun punishing. I felt like in my games, what I focused on was completely different. And so I really enjoyed that I had a game where, for instance, I focused on drilling and what could I get from drilling. And I had a strategy of like drilling and selling brine. And by the way, there's a trap with brine. Everyone just be careful. You can't keep selling brine all game. At a certain point, you can't keep selling brine because it just is not feasible. And then in another game, I was really focused on pushing my workers and then being a really good, repairing. I felt like I was having distinct experiences. It was not feeling samey to me, and I appreciated that quite a bit.
Yeah.
So that's always, I think, a good sign.
It's true. Like, I'm not sure we've successfully played out the brine strategy. There probably is one.
There probably is one.
Yeah.
I think it's a finesse strategy. I think this is a game, I think, that's all about learning its curves and its edges and its pointy areas. And like, if you're going to do a brine strategy, how are you going to do that the best possible way? So I think it could be probably a top 10 game for me of the year. Doesn't matter. It's too early to even make these proclamations.
If you're going to go 10 deep, then maybe. Sure.
Yeah,
sure.
I would go 10 deep. But I think it's really good. I think if you're expecting another game like White Castle or Red Cathedral, that's maybe
it's not quite at that level.
Not like that.
Yeah.
It's you're gonna maybe be disappointed. But I think
I would still say check it out.
Yeah, I think it's cheap. And I think if you love
it's like a $40 MSRP.
Yeah. Cheap, I should say cheap, quote unquote, compared to like a $70 game. But I think, if you like a challenging puzzle, then go check it out. Great. So I think that's all the news that's fit to print for this week's.
Well, have a great time in Europe.
Thank you so much. I hope I come back with an interesting and unexpected game. And in the meantime, you've been listening to Game Brain, produced and edited by Matthew Robinson, Tom Donnelly, Trey Alsop, and Ben Mandelker. Special thanks to Daedalus for our incredible music. More on Daedalus at GameBrainPod.com. And thanks to Edamar Peleg for our incredible graphics. Be sure to check him out on Instagram at Krubaloni or on his website, Krubaloni.com. You can reach us by email at contact@GameBrainPod.com. Thanks for listening, and go play some games with friends or make some friends with games.